The Lodger, a story of the London fog, is usually considered the first true Alfred Hitchcock film, as it comprises many themes and motifs that recur frequently throughout his oeuvre. An innocent man wrongly accused of a crime, blonde female protagonists, handcuffs, references to Christian iconography, haunting painted portraits, and, last but not least, the notion of the house as a place of danger and confinement, equipped with hidden objects, closed doors, sinister staircases, and inhabitants suspecting one another. Loosely based on the story of Jack the Ripper, The Lodger was adapted from a 1913 novel by Marie Belloc Lowndes about a serial killer who stalks and slashes his female victims in foggy London. It tells the story of a mysterious man with the mannerisms of a dandy, the so-called The Lodger, played by Ivor Novello, who rents a room in the house of the Bunting family. This middle-class family consists of Mr. Bunting, his wife, and their blonde daughter Daisy, who is a fashion model. Both the Buntings and Joe, a detective wooing Daisy, begin to suspect that the mysterious lodger cannot be but a so-called Avenger, who terrorizes the entire city by murdering young blonde women. In the end, the lodger turns out to be the brother of the Avenger's first victim, who swore at his mother's deathbed to bring the Avenger to justice. As indicated by the film's subtitle, the Bunting house is situated in London. In the Avenger's range of action, the house is localized on the city map by both the police and the lodger in the area where Vauxhall Bridge Road becomes Besbury Gardens, just before Vauxhall Bridge. This location in Pimlico refutes the claim, repeated by several commentators and Hitchcock himself in a 1970 interview, that the Buntings lived in Bloomsbury. The Bunting house is unmistakably part of the modern metropolis, which Hitchcock evokes by shots of its traffic, eliminated advertisings, newspapers, revues, pubs, hospitals, sophisticated fashion shows, and anonymous crowds. Furthermore, the seclusion and security of the house is juxtaposed to the nocturnal metropolis, which combines the age-old fear of darkness with modern anxieties that have resulted from urbanization and its anonymity, its alienation, and its many new dangers, such as a prowling serial killer. The Bunting house contributes largely to the picture, which can be considered as a Kammerspiel film that is constructed by means of architectural and domestic close-ups. The bottom part of an opening door, a hand on a doorknob, a foot on the stairs, a cuckoo clock, a mysteriously dimming wall lamp, a fireplace, money on the mantelpiece, paintings and reproductions on the wall, a swinging ceiling lamp, to name but some. Furthermore, the film's title and protagonist indicate the importance of domestic settings, furnished rooms, and interiors. For this film, Hitchcock and art directors C. Wilfred Arnold and Bertram Evans had a three-sided house constructed, with narrow walls and low ceilings in the exact dimensions of a middle-class home. The difficulties of lighting such a set were considerable, but with photographer Gaetano Ventimiglia's genial patience and Hitchcock's knowledge of how the Germans had moved cameras up and down a staircase, the complex and evocative shots were all achieved with surprising economy. Hitchcock opens the space of the house by means of striking camera placements which betray his collaborations with German technicians and his acute observations of German directors during the previous years. The Lodger is also indebted to German expressionist cinema. In several scenes, such as the one situated in Mrs. Bunting's bedroom, menacing shadows create Caligari-esque effects. Both Belloc Lowndes and Hitchcock have emphasized the importance of a lower middle-class household as the locus of this story. The home of the Buntings is pervaded with a kind of modesty that contrasts sharply with Daisy's world of a mannequin modeling high fashions. And the modest Bunting house also stands out in contrast to the lodger's own aristocratic mansion, which is the setting for the final scene of the film. An emphatic interest in architecture marks the entire oeuvre of Hitchcock, who started his career as an art director and who became famous by using well-known buildings and monuments in his films. Furthermore, several films can be considered stories of uncanny domestic settings, like Jamaica Inn, Number 17, Rebecca, Suspicion, Shadow of a Doubt, Rope, Dial M for Murder, Rear Window, and Psycho. The Lodger tells the story of a house and its oppressive interior spaces. The vertical organization of the Bunting house perfectly answers to a dual spatial scheme that recurs in many Hitchcock films, such as in Rebecca, Psycho, and The Birds. On the one hand, there's the ground floor, which is generally characterized by banality and a precarious sense of decency. On the other hand, there's the upper level, where hidden under a deceptive charm, a dark, malignant, or destructive force resides, creating anxiety and moral instability. This model applies perfectly to The Lodger, in which the Buntings live downstairs. An outdoor staircase connects to the kitchen, which is even situated half a floor under street level. Strikingly, the Buntings live in the kitchen. Many domestic scenes that include Daisy and her parents occur here. Joe as well, who acts as if he owns the house, enters through the exterior staircase. The Buntings seem uneasy in the upper floors of the house. Only Daisy appears to be a comfortable and welcome visitor to the second floor. The both seductive and sinister Lodger, by contrast, lives upstairs. His remarkable arrival is theatrically heralded by flickering gaslights, followed by his foreboding shadow that slowly approaches and looms outside the Bunting front door. The forward tracking movement of the camera, the first camera movement of the film, implies the Lodger's point of view. Subsequently, his eerie entrance into the house is overly melodramatic, yet effectively noirish and expressionistic. Immediately, the presence of the Lodger turns the house, the most parts of which are unknown to the viewer until so far, into an uncanny and sinister environment. As soon as the Lodger enters the house, the rooms are filled with spooky shadows. As in Rebecca, Suspicion, Shadow of a Doubt, Notorious, and Dial M for Murder, a young woman has to live under the same roof as a man who falls under suspicion of being a murderer or even a serial killer. Hitchcock made several dramas about the appearance, as if by magic, of a mysterious man who may have the power to make a young woman's romantic dreams come true, but who also may be a monster. In these dramas, the family home becomes a site of fear, anxiety, betrayal, madness, and murder. In several Hitchcock films, the house becomes a trap, the family a means of confinement. The architectural connections between the spatial and social levels in the Bunting house are also important visual motifs, and they mark significant moments in the narrative. The most important vertical connection between the different levels is, of course, the staircase, which is a quintessential Hitchcock image. Foreshadowing similar scenes in Blackmail, Shadow of a Doubt, Vertigo, Psycho, and Frenzy, The Lodger contains an interesting early example of Hitchcock's many sinister staircases. One of the most memorable images of the film is a vertical shot down through the stairwell, which includes several flights of stairs as the ghost-like and disembodied gloved hand of the Lodger makes a circuit of the banisters. Furthermore, the stairwell itself is presented as an oppressive structure. In a shot looking down the stairwell, the stairs are descending away from the camera, in a spiral, drawing the eye down and creating a slightly giddy effect. Prefiguring the famous zoom-out dolly in the tower scene in Vertigo, this top shot makes it seem as if the staircase itself has a malignant power. In addition, the picturing of the staircase includes other striking visual effects. The parallel vertical lines of the banister evoke prison bars, creating an atmosphere of confinement. Another connection between the two levels in the Bunting house is an oral one, which, in a silent movie, had to be evoked visually. Hitchcock translated the perception of the sound of the lodger's footsteps into a shot of a moving chandelier, and subsequently into a shot taken through a glass ceiling. The shot is striking, all the more so because it is taken from a tilted oblique angle so that the lodger's body is foreshortened. However, a careful reconstruction of the floor plan of the Bunting house reveals several spatial inconsistencies. The Bunting's living room and the lodging are situated on two different sides of the axis formed by the front door and stairwell. As a result, the direct vertical relation between both rooms, which is evoked in the scene with the glass ceiling, is completely disturbed. In addition, the floor level of the lodger's room is unclear, as sometimes he climbs only one, on other occasions 2 flights of stairs. Other architectural uncertainties include the relation between the Bunting bedroom and the street, and the position of the bathroom. Apart from the fact that the Bunting living room cannot be situated directly under the lodger's room, the glass ceiling emphasizes its very opposite. The Bunting house is a typical 19th century dwelling which secludes itself from the metropolis and which consists of separate rooms, all concealing their own identities and stories. Hitchcock's dramas usually take place in bourgeois interiors that box private life, together with its secrets, inside a barricade of walls, floors, and ceilings, a topic Hitchcock would explore explicitly in Rear Window. Despite the striking shot of the glass ceiling, the archetypal Hitchcockian house is completely at odds with the concept of a glass building, which runs like a thread through the utopias of architectural modernism, and which was also often connected to the dynamic space provided by cinema. In 1926, in the year of the release of The Lodger, Eisenstein worked on his unrealized Glasshouse film. In contrast with the transparency and spatial dynamics of modernist architecture, the Bunting interior is closed and filled with objects. In the lodger's point of view panning shot of his new accommodation, we see that the room is full of painted portraits, which also play an important part in Rebecca, Suspicion, The Paradine Case, Vertigo, and The Birds. Most of the paintings represent blonde women. Another one depicts a scene of rape. Disturbed by the paintings, which show similarities to the works by pre-Raphaelite artists such as Edward Burne-Jones, the lodger turns them towards the wall. "I am afraid I don't like these pictures. Can't they be put somewhere else?" he asks. When the paintings have been removed from the lodger's room, empty spots mar the walls. "I know it looks ugly, but they got on my nerves," he explains. Later in the film, one of the portraits reappear in the Bunting's living room downstairs. Hitchcock emphasizes its presence when Mrs. Bunting starts to suspect that the lodger is the murderer. The attention that Hitchcock draws to these portraits is telling. They not only foreshadow Hitchcock's lifelong fascination for both painted portraits and blondes, they are also symptomatic of his vision of women, which is influenced by Victorian pictorial precedents. In addition, the portraits elicit an attentive gaze from the characters, a kind of gaze that marks Hitchcock's cinema in general and his modernist masterpieces of the 1950s and early 60s in particular. In the scene in which the lodger sees the paintings, the game of glances and gazes is even complicated by reflections in a mirror. A frame that includes both the lodger and a female portrait initially suggests that the painting is behind him, but when the lodger begins to move, it becomes clear that he's moving toward the portrait and that the mirror behind him reflects both. Already in this 1926 film, Hitchcock creates a kind of dizzying relation between paintings, reflections, and reality that would mark a film such as Vertigo. Finally, because of Hitchcock's fascination for private and confined spaces, another important part of the Bunting house is the bathroom, which is situated on one of the intermediate floors at the back of the house. The lodger contains one of the few Hitchcock scenes in which a bathroom is used for conventional purposes, such as taking a bath. Moreover, the bathroom scene is also one of the few that is situated in a domestic setting. Remarkably, since most of Hitchcock's bathroom and washroom scenes are set in hotels, workplaces, at stations, or in public transport vehicles. In Hitchcock's universe, of course, bathrooms are linked with the notion of voyeurism, and they are often presented as a site for the return of the repressed. The bathroom scene in The Lodger emphasizes Daisy's vulnerability. Anticipating by more than 30 years the shower scene in Psycho, the lodger creeps downstairs and stealthily tries the door handle of the bathroom. In addition, the scene, which is situated in the most private part of the house, has been invaded by the atmosphere that mystifies the city outside. The warm vapors in the bathroom evoke the gloomy London fog in which the serial killer operates. In the Bunting house, the dangers of the modern metropolis have penetrated the domestic safety of the interior.